listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Hey folks, that can mean only one thing, that Jody that we're playing, and it's time for David's Pick on America's Web Radio. And this is the show that's about veterans and the Georgia Military Hall of Fame. We honor them. They honor us by sponsoring our show, and we certainly do appreciate that. And look forward to having a great show on. We have the retired Captain Bill Robinson on, and whoa, my goodness, out of the clear blue, we had a little information. We'd forgotten to take the cue off, and there came Let's Talk Venezuelan, and their show doesn't start until 1 o'clock, so we were a little premature on that. But Bill, you're on, and glad to have you with us again this morning.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here to share a few minutes with you and your audience, and basically promote my Air Force.
You have your own
when
Air
I heard
Force.
the cadence there earlier, I remember the cadence we knew: GI beans, GI gravy. Gee, I just wished I'd have joined the Navy.
I tell you what, I can't, obviously I can't speak for you, but the Jodies, if people haven't been in the service, they don't appreciate the value of the Jody when you need to go that last mile, and you need something to keep you going, and you do go, and that's the Jody helps you get there with a smile on your face, and it's always good, always good.
It's a sense of real accomplishment, that's for sure. Yes, sir.
Well, when we were on before, we talked about your experience and as a POW. Do you want to just give a quick summary of that? And then what I'd really like to do is get into your speaking career and the number of speeches you give around the country, as well as then I really want to dig into your book, The Longest Rescue.
Okay. Basically, I joined the Air Force in 1961, and I remember the song that was playing on the radio that day is "Goodbye, Cruel World, Goodbye. I'm off to join the circus." And it pretty much uneventful. Well, I can't say it was uneventful because when I came into the service, I was sitting around in the break room hearing the stories about the Cuban crisis, and then of '61 when the Bay of Pigs, and then I happened to be in the service in '62 when the Cuban Missile Crisis came around, and I was never more proud of my country as we stood the Russians down, you might say, and life went on. I was in Korea in 1963 when our president was assassinated, and I saw the strength of my country as it recovered from a devastating loss of a president. And I guess that my first opportunity to vote came in the mail-in thing in Korea in 1963 or 64 when I had to prove who I was and got an absentee ballot. And I had listened to some of the speeches over the television, and I saw this one guy stand up there and said, "I'm going to go over there and take care of business." And this other guy said, "I'm not going to send American boys to do what Asian boys should do for themselves." And I thought that was a good plan. And less than a year later, I was sitting in a prisoner camp in North Vietnam and said, "What did he say?"
Would you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. And so, from Korea, I went back to the States for a short period of time, then came back over to Southeast Asia in 1965 and was part of a rescue team at the northwest corner or northeast corner of Thailand, called a place called NKP. Of course, we were told we weren't there. We couldn't identify where we were to anyone at that particular time, but our mission was to offer the best possible chance of a pilot surviving. Like I said, we went into the war without an airplane. We took an off-the-shelf, what we call LBR, local base rescue airplane type, HH-43B, and nicknamed Pedro, and we turned it into a combat airplane with a piece of quarter-inch steel on the pilot and the co-pilot seat, and we sat on our World War II flak vest in the back. But we were willing to do our part for those who were going into harm's way, and we were willing to go into harm's way unarmed to bring them home or extract them from hostile territory.
Oh,
that's basically what we were doing today. I was scheduled at that time as a rotational basis, and I was supposed to go back home in July, but I was conveniently extended for the convenience of the government, and ended up being shot down on the 20th of September, 1965, and which started my 2,703-day adventure being held by the North Vietnamese.
Okay, for those
simple description was there was hours, days, weeks, months, and even years of boredom punctuated by terror.
Yeah.
At first, they were kind of humane, I guess, and they did a few attention getters. I was lined up in front of a firing squad, blindfolded and kneeling down over a freshly dug grave, and I thought my life was over at that time. I was just a month past my 22nd birthday, but for some reason, the good Lord intervened, and that didn't happen, and I was convinced from that point on that I was going to survive. I didn't know how, I didn't know what the future held, but I had trust in myself and my country, the other individuals with me, and most of all, trust in my God that I would be seen through and someday taste this thing we call freedom.
For those that don't know it, H-41 is a Huey, right?
No, sir. Its nickname is Pedro.
Okay.
It's a double bladed airplane that was designed strictly for rescue. It was first used by the Navy in the 58 and 59, and then the Air Force bought it when they. I guess it's pre-four-wheel drives. Used to an airplane never crashed on the runway, it run off the runway. Well, the fire trucks couldn't get off the runway to get to the airplane, and they came up with this airplane, and what it was, it had a fire suppression kit and two firemen on board, and they would chase the airplane down the runway, and when it rocked in the runway, they'd get as close as they could, drop the fire bottle off, and then back up and drop two firemen off, and they'd go in and with the help of the blades, fighting back the smoke to get in and retrieve the pilot, the crew members or pilot, as whichever the case may be, and it improved the survival rate once an airplane exited the runway in a mud field. But now, pretty much they've been replaced with all-wheel drive type fire trucks and et cetera that can just about go over any terrain, and so they now have been replaced. The proudest part we have of the H-43 was that in Afghanistan today, all rescue missions are flown with the call sign Pedro in our honor. And so it's humbling to see that someone recognizes. We were eventually replaced with what was referred to as the Jolly Green Giant, and we 43 guys refer to ourselves as pre-green.
Okay, so it was a fixed wing. And,
no, it's a helicopter.
It's a helicopter? Okay. So
it's a twin-bladed helicopter. Looked like an egg beater upside down.
Oh, okay. Now I know which one you're talking about. I'm sorry that I should have checked that out before. But, okay, so would you consider yourself... did you carry any medical personnel with you?
We had a PJ, a paramedic on board that was he was with us in case he needed any medical attention, and we, like I said, we flew with a pilot, co-pilot, the crew chief / flight engineer, and a paramedic.
Okay,
he was capable. We could let him down on a horse if needed to be, and assist the pilot and bring him back up, or we would just, like I said, he would assist him once we got him in the airplane.
So would you have considered yourself a dust-off at that point, or was that strictly titled to the Huey?
Well, that was basically, like I said, that was a South Vietnam term. I jokingly say that I didn't make it to South Vietnam until 2015, years after the war. I was flying out of Thailand, and we had the southern part of North Vietnam. We had the capability of fuel range probably to get within 40 miles of Hanoi, but and then the Navy took care of the coastal region, and of course then they had the 43s and and the Army in South Vietnam that pretty well took care of that. We were just mostly in Laos and in North Vietnam.
Oh, well, we never went to Laos, did we?
Oh, yeah, I heard that one time.
And we wonder what's wrong today, huh?
Well, we were 7 miles from the Laotian border. I guess we were just there sunbathing. I'm not sure.
Well, maybe you did some of that, but I don't know how much of that you really did. But okay, so you came home, and what was your reception like when you came home?
Well, I got a hero's welcome that belonged to somebody else, and that was the humbling part. Where when we first came home, I was in the first group that landed, and we represented, I think, an end to something that everyone had been longing for a long time, and so if they had to give us a hero's welcome to get the whole thing over with, but to me, we were brought in under light. I mean, under daylight. Where the guys that came back and girls that came back from Vietnam were brought in the middle of the night, and I got proudly wearing my uniform all the way across country, where they were told to remove theirs as not to offend anyone. And so that has been my goal, is to make sure that those who serviced and sacrificed never are forgotten. They were the real heroes. They're the ones that went over there and experienced the burden, and they came home under darkness, so as not to offend anyone.
That's
isn't
that
I'm
the
always been
silliest
humbled that they did not get their proper recognition, and the recognition I got belonged to them, not me. And and I always say that, to me, the saddest moment in American history in my lifetime was when we forgave those who ran before we as a nation stood up and said thank you to those who served.
Mm-hmm. Were you at the Hilton?
Most of the time I was at the Hilton. Hilton in the beginning was when our numbers were small, and I was about the 20th shoot down, even though myself and Neil Black are classified as the longest held enlisted POWs in American history. There were about 20 or 21 officers who were shot down ahead of us, and so our numbers were small in that time, and then as things picked up, like I said, by September there was about 24 of us by the end of September, and by the end of December there was 62. So we had a rapid expansion at that particular time, and they created a new camp about a mile and a half from the Hilton called the Zoo, and we were some of us were moved into there, and then as our numbers continued to group, a group of us was moved up about 40 miles from Hanoi to a camp called the Bry Patch, where we first experienced horrible physical, mental, and any kind of abuse you could think of. We were living under conditions with no running water, no electricity, and we were basically hogtied during the day if we weren't being beaten, and we stayed up there until our health started to fail, and then brought us back down to the zoo. And of course, they created what was part of the zoo, what they call a zoo annex, which is a series right. I mean, it's just a wall between the zoo. The zoo was an old French studio, and it was kind of interesting. They had an old swimming pool inside of it, and it's kind of interesting how life can be. That we were bumping our bow buckets, our bathrooms, in one end of the pool, and they were dipping our drinking water out of the other.
Okay.
But somehow we survived it, and then we basically, like I said, when Johnson stopped the bombing in 1968, and we were essentially cut off from the outside world for nearly 3 years, and then we didn't know anything, and then all of a sudden the Sante raid happened. We didn't know exactly what was going on at that particular point, but it was a lifesaver as far as I'm concerned. That even though they didn't rescue a single one, it made the under the Johnson administration we had been labeled, even by our Defense Department. Robert McNamara said in January 1966 that the POWs were expendable. And, that didn't go over well with our families as their loved ones were sent into harm's way and then labeled expendable by our own government. And after the election, actually POW families were for the first time invited to the White House to meet with the president, and he briefed them on what he was doing. In fact, he encouraged them or made arrangements for families to go to the Paris peace talks and put a face on prisoners of war. And for the first time, we got some recognition. And the next thing that happened was when President Nixon had the opportunity, he supported the Sante raid, and where they believed they could extract some prisoners from a camp, much like the Bry Patch I had been in, but it was in that same distance, but in a different direction than we were. And they went in and they had a successful mission, but recovered no one. But as a result of that, the Vietnamese changed our label from expendable to high value, and that was the first time we moved into groups. Up to that point, many of us had spent as much as 6 to 8 months in solitary, which some guys had spent over 4 years in solitary confinement.
Wow.
But because of this situation, the fear of Nixon coming back, they cleaned out the Hilton, which was being used to house political prisoners, and inside it was a female prison. And they brought us back and put us in kind of a compound living where there was at least 40 people in a room in different areas there of what we call Camp Unity. And for the first time, like I said, some of those guys had not seen another American for nearly 4 years.
Wow.
They had tapped through the wall, but as far as seeing and shaking hands or smiling at another American, that had not been in over 4 years.
Okay, when you said
part of that is
a second ago, you said female prison. Were they Vietnamese females or American females?
Yes, they were Vietnamese, yeah.
Oh, okay. And
yeah, we didn't have. There was only one, as I know of, female prisoner. There was a German nurse that was captured in South Vietnam, and she was brought up north. There were more. There were, I believe, somewhere around 6 females that were captured during the Vietnam War. Most of them were civilians, and they died on the trail along with many others, being transported to North Vietnam due to the horrible conditions. I couldn't imagine someone having to walk 1,500 miles like some of them did with their arms tied behind them, blindfolded, and being treated like wild animals. But she was the only one that basically survived. There's some stories that's just unbelievable about the courage of these nurses and social workers that were there that died in the arms of American soldiers as they were being transported north due to the horrifying living conditions. I always say that I was enjoying luxury accommodations up north compared to my brothers and sisters that were being held in South Vietnam, and eventually some of them made it to North Vietnam. I think there was probably over half of the ones that were captured in the South eventually, after some of them said it's been almost a year traveling, they end up in the prison camps in North Vietnam, but they were completely isolated from us, and we didn't know of them until basically we came home.
Bill, we need to take a quick break, and I'm going to do live breaks during this show today. And that being that North Georgia and Georgia in general has come up to the plate because of veterans, and we have probably one of the states that honors veterans more than any other state in the Union. And we have because of Paul Unger and Rick White. Rick is a retired colonel, and Rick does a fantastic job as the director of the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame, of which you're part of. You've been inducted, and we also have Johns Creek that's taken the Vietnam veteran, the 50% size of the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. The one that's in Johns Creek traveled all over the United States for many years, and then Johns Creek, Georgia bought it, and they've given it a permanent home in Newtown Park. And then we also have Peachtree Corners that has a memorial to the Vietnam veterans. All of these, if you live in Atlanta or live around Atlanta, or you're coming from out of town to visit Atlanta for some reason, see family, whatever, be sure and put these locations on your tour plans. You'll get more out of them than you can ever imagine. So with that, you're listening to America's Web Radio, and we're glad to have you listening. And our guest today is Captain Retired Bill Robinson, and you started out as, like I did, as a grunt, correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I spent 12 years as an enlisted member, and my last 11 years I spent as a commissioned officer.
And you got your commission when you came back from Vietnam. And
yes, sir.
You don't have to. I was just an E5, so you don't have to say yes, sir, to me. I have to say it to you. But
well, we all have great respect for each other, for those of us who have worn a uniform, who have answered the call of our country, and whether we're in a harm's way or whether we're supporting those in harm's way or whether we were in peacetime, we took up the most important cause in America today, and that was to stand ready to defend her against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Amen. This is something.
I went through, when we moved into a larger group, we were about 9 of us together, and we started sharing stories of our experience, and some of the guys said, you guys deserve something for what the example you have laid for the rest of us. I was an E4 when I was shot down, and Neil Black was a E2, and Art Cormier was a E5. So anyway, they came up with the idea, and they said that we'd like to offer you guys a commission, and so they went through all the proper channels in our through the tap and from different room from ISRO to the compound SRO to the building SROs, and and until it went through the chain of command, and he got approval all the way up to General Flynn, who was actually a colonel at Shoot Down, and he said it was a good idea, and he sanctioned it, and then he sent back a message congratulating the three of us for being commissioned and approving it. And then he said, "Oh, by the way, you need to get it OTS." So we went through OTS in the prison camp. So I jokingly say we rode on the back of a shovel with a piece of chalk that fell off the roof, clay tile. But we shared experiences. We had direct communication with 2 Air Force Academy graduates and 2 Naval Academy graduates, plus the inputs from all the other officers in the neighborhood as to what we should be or shouldn't be considered as officer know-how. And we went through almost a year of, constantly discussing military history, Air Force history, and et cetera, et cetera. So, I always get a kick out of telling people when I've been to the Navy birthdays, the Army birthdays, the Air and the Marine Corps birthdays, and the Coast Guards, and I always remind them their services is much older than ours, but at least I'm older than my service. I was born in 43, and the Air Force wasn't created until 47, so none of them could claim that. So my claim to fame is I'm older than the Air Force.
Well, let me ask you something. I think I did the first time we visited together, but can you name one veteran that can only tell one story?
No, sir. Every day is an adventure, whether you spend 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, or 40 years. You don't get up to the same thing every day. I think that's what makes the military interesting. It is, jokingly, we always said if you hadn't heard a rumor by 8 o'clock, you were supposed to start one.
We're getting out tomorrow.
Absolutely.
But I do want to take this opportunity to for the parents and grandparents, and we may even have a couple of young folks listening, that the military today, if you're graduating from high school and you don't want to go to college, or you don't know what you want to do, or if you're just now if you're graduating from college and don't know what you want to do, please take a look at the military. It offers more opportunities than any other industry in the world, and you can do so many things in the military, and whether it's Air Force, Army, Navy, whatever it is, whatever your interests are as well, and you can get your assignment. You can it's just the place to look, and we encourage any and every young person to do it, be you female or be you male. Just take a look at the military and what you want to do and how it can fit into your plans for your future. And I don't think there's a better place to look than the military after you graduate from high school or from college. So back to you, Bill. And
yes, I want to amplify just what you said. Is that the military is it's not the same one your grandfather joined, but it's still a wonderful opportunity. I've heard all the stories about seeing the world through a porthole, but really you get out and see and you understand. I think the best leaders of this country, whether they be local or whether they be at a county or state level, are people that have been there, done that, and have the T-shirt.
Yes, sir.
And they have a broader understanding, of what the world is all about. I know we can read a lot from the textbooks, but the textbooks have been rewritten so much that I don't even recognize the history I'm a part of, as far as trying to tell the truth.
Yep.
I guess that I see that basically what we've done today is we've We used to call it tough skin when I was growing up. Now they call it sensitivity training. But to me, I was very fortunate. I grew up with a patriotic group. My dad, my uncles, my senior cousins all have served in the military, and they conditioned me at a younger age that someday I would be called upon to give back for what I have been so richly blessed with. And unfortunately, we have to encourage people right now when you realize that, when you think about World War II with 100% participation, with the food on the table being rationed, and Korea was a 30% participation, or Vietnam was a 10% participation, and now we're up to less than 1% participation in the defense of our nation and supporting of our allies throughout the world. So it is, and I can explain some of that in the sense that a B-17 had a crew of 10. A flight of B-17s with 180 airplanes. That's well over 2,000 people in the air. Then you got that many more on the ground supporting that. One B-52 can carry as much as 10 B-17s. And it has a crew now. It used to be a crew of 5. Now it's a crew of 4. So we have, through technology, done a better job. And then now we have the smart bomb. Smart bomb, it can pinpoint a bomb. They could take out half of an apartment building and not touch the other half, And so technology has played an important part. And that's the opportunities is available for young people today to be a part of that ever-improving and minimizing the men and women on the battlefield. And it's not like we're going to take this hill over here. Like right now, we just remove the hill and move on.
That's right.
But,
and,
when you think about World War II, the guys may march for 6 weeks and then go into battle.
Mm-hmm.
But Vietnam was the first time that a person there for 13 months saw an average of over 260 days of combat in their tour, where in World War II in Korea they may be marching for half of their tour, but unfortunately difference in World War II in Korea, they were there for the duration, and where we were rotated in and out, kind of like what we're doing now, and so. The war is not up close and personal as it used to be.
I want to take one moment, Bill, to mention this and enlist everyone that, particularly veterans, but anyone that's listening, to say a little prayer for my best friend. And he and I were roommates in college together. Then he went to Vietnam, and then when he came back, we both continued our education and were roommates. And right as we speak, he is suffering his cancer from Agent Orange, and he's literally right at this moment in the process of having much, if not all, of his tongue removed because he had cancer from being sprayed with Agent Orange in Vietnam. And his recovery looks his prognosis is pretty good, and they will be rebuilding his tongue, which I didn't know. I had no clue they could do that, but he's going through surgery as we speak, and I want to enlist any and everybody that is listening to pray for my best friend, J. Roy, and he's a good Texan. He was a Golden Gloves champion of Texas at one time, and he's just a good man, and he served his country very, very well. And these are the stories that, Vietnam has had a lasting results on so many veterans, be it from limbs and just like with IEDs in the Middle East, some scars you just can't get away from. And, J. Roy has suffered diabetes and cancer because of Agent Orange. And so I'm soliciting any and everybody that's listening and listens to the podcast to say a little prayer for him, and I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's sad that it's taken the government so long to recognize the Agent Orange policy. It's a sad point that we have so many veterans out there suffering from this disease. I'm in a fear of it because I flew on airplanes that were known to be carrying Agent Orange, but luckily for me that I have been, cancer-free all these times, and, but I do have friends that have experienced it, and some are up above looking down at us, and so many of them have recovered.
Well, I want to say one other thing, Bill. Bill, excuse me, but
to support our men and women that are fighting this battle, not only as a health issue, but with the government, because they haven't come up with a confirmed diagnosis, you might say. Is like in my case, all the things that you mentioned at Agent Orange are presumptive as a prisoner of war, but the word Agent Orange is never mentioned.
Well, I want to say one other thing in our political season that we're in right now, and that's a big thank you to our president, President Trump, who signed into law the Blue Water Bill, and this was, I believe, in December of last year. It's almost been in effect for a year now, but the Blue Water Bill was for many, many, many years, well, since Vietnam, the Navy and the people that were serving in the Navy and Coast Guard were not eligible for Agent Orange treatment because, well, how could you get Agent Orange if you weren't on the ground? Well, those boats that were just off the coast of Vietnam or anchored in Vietnam or whatever the situation was, they got sprayed just like the troops on the ground did. And they suffered for years with Agent Orange and never got anything from the government. But since President Trump signed the bill, it's called the Blue Water Bill, and I think he was great to do it, and I certainly support his action in doing it, as well as the people that advocated and solicited his support to get a bill signed where the Navy and Coast Guard, and people don't realize the role that the Coast Guard played in Vietnam. They were very active there. And so anyway, I salute our Commander-in-Chief for doing the right thing, which many other presidents before them didn't have the intestinal fortitude to stand up to the plate and do what he did.
Yeah, one of the things is we have TRICARE for Life. A lot of people don't know that that was spearheaded by Colonel Bud Day, Medal of Honor recipient from Fort Walton Beach, Florida. Bud took it all the way to the Supreme Court, fighting for what we call TRICARE for Life. And the promises that the government made and said they never put on paper. You see, a lot of, up until TRICARE for Life, the guy, when he turned 65, then he was basically
on his own.
He was told that drugs that he needed were no longer available at the base hospital because they were cutting costs. And I knew friends that went from getting in medicine that needed to a $700 a month medical bill as a result of the way that we were treated by the previous administrations. But Bud fought all the way to the Supreme Court and won what we now refer to as the TRICARE for Life, with a bunch of sergeants there in Fort Walton Beach who came in and manned the phones and did all the paperwork and all the legwork and supported what we now know as TRICARE for Life. And we can give a former prisoner of war attorney, Medal of Honor recipient, he took the fight all the way to the Supreme Court and won for our veterans.
You know, and that's the way it should be. And you know, you mentioned something that just literally brings tears to my eyes, and I hate when I hear it, but I know it's the truth. And unfortunately, we've become a country of fake news and everything else. But the fact that TRICARE for life is so important and so it's wonderful. And when you think that 1% of the country, and you said in Vietnam it was 10%, I believe you said, but when you have only 1% that will raise their right hand for the most wonderful country in the world, that's deplorable. And for all of the people that didn't serve, I hope you have a hard time when you shave in the morning or looking at yourself in the mirror. And I was no hero. I did not go to Vietnam, nor do I ever claim that I did. But I did, as they call us now, we were Vietnam veteran eras, Vietnam eras. And as I've kidded, the way my case is, my 201 file says Vietnam veteran ERROR, not ERA, but, you know, I did put in my 6 years. And
well, it's again, well, there should never be any difference. A veteran is a veteran. He served his country, he or she, when called upon. And to me, to distinguish between, because we had more than one front. I mean, there was more than Vietnam going on during that period of time. So we had troops in Europe, we had troops all over the world, and we had troops in the embassies all over the world, you know, that were serving their country with honor. And they were in support of us, in those of us who were quite, and we're all, if we want to use the word hero, we're all heroes, because we are that 1% that stood up and said, like my World War II guys, and they stood up after Pearl Harbor and stood up and said, "Take me, I want to defend America."
mm-hmm.
And all of us that have worn that uniform, our purpose was to defend America and our allies, and we did it in an honorable fashion.
Absolutely. You know, I look at World War II. My father was in the Navy, and I thought I'd see more of this after the World Trade Centers, after 9/11, but there was some of it, but not. My dad, December the 8th of after Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor. On December the 8th, my dad put up his successful business in Brownfield, Texas. He owned Terry County Lumberyard, and he put it up for sale, sold it for, 10 cents on the dollar, and joined the Navy, and served his 6 years in the Navy, and I was always proud of what my dad did, and we saw some of that in 9/11, but not the amount that I would have liked to have seen or thought we'd see. But we may bend, but we don't break. And
well, that's one of the great things about America. We're just ordinary people delivering extraordinary circumstances. We stand together. We stand up as one. Yes, I wish that we could get more young people, but it starts at home. And they got to have the proper training at home to realize that this world is not a free ride.
True.
Yeah, and it's not. It's sad that we use it's not your fault more than we use. It's your responsibility.
Right. Well, I tell you, I've been blessed to have a number of, a couple of gentlemen on that are very active, and they're the commanders of the junior ROTC, and I've kidded him about the programs that they run, and I said, you know, even though I've got my degree, do you mind if I come back and go back through high school? Because the programs that you all are running now are they're fantastic. And
Absolutely.
they give young people a chance to understand the point. You know, it's like some of this crap that's going on in Portland and Seattle and so forth. You know, there's one word that I think every branch of the military honors and proves day in and day out, and we wouldn't have the stuff in Portland and Seattle, in my opinion, if this one word were put into effect. And the teaching in all branches of the military is the word discipline. From getting up in the morning and making your bunk to the way you're... Yep. And we all need discipline. And if those creeps out in California and Seattle were to be disciplined, it'd be a different tune today.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's, you know, I like to, you know, we have the 6 articles code of conduct, and I like to, you know, quote number 6, which is, I will never forget that I am an American, responsible for my action, dedicated to make my country free. I will trust in my God and the United States of America. That kind of summarizes what we are. We are responsible for our action. And in being a good citizen, we have to be able to live up to that.
Bill, that's
I
beautiful.
know it's just like we lived under the motto, return with honor.
Mm-hmm.
But we always said in many ways, you never give up, you never give in, you roll with the punches, you bounce back, get ready for the next round. I was jokingly telling somebody the other day, I said, you know, they tried to beat this thing called socialism, communism into us, and now we got people serving Kool-Aid on the side of the road and people are drinking it.
Yeah.
It's just frightening.
You know, and this is something that if you go to my website or you go to any of the Twitters or Facebook or whatever, when I was growing up, from elementary school on through college, we were taught socialism is one step away from communism. And all you have to do is look at Venezuela right now. They started out with socialism, and now it's a communist country. And this is where the Democrats are wanting to take us. And they're going to get a fight. They're not going to just take over. And we're not going to give in, particularly the veterans. We're not going to give in to socialism by any stretch.
I certainly believe in a helping hand, but I don't believe in a way of life. You have to take some responsibility. But we need a hand up, not a handout.
Yes, sir. I couldn't have said it better. And just the quote that you made a second ago, it was just beautiful. And you know, if you don't live for something, then you are nothing, in my opinion. And there's nothing better than to live for the United States. And you know, no greater love hath man than to lay down his life for a friend. And
well, that's what I have. You know, and like I said, I tell people how fortunate I am. Is basically on Panel 2 West, Line 191 is my co-pilot. So that's how close I came to the wall. Just around the corner on the other turn of the wall, I forget the panel, but it's the last panel, there's a young man named Walter Ferguson. He gave his life for the freedoms that I enjoy today. He was the first guy shot down in Linebacker 2 in 1972 and killed. He was a month from retirement, But rather than to go home and retire, he wanted to bring his brothers home. And so we honor people like that who made the ultimate sacrifice for the freedoms that we all enjoy today. Without their sacrifices, and simply put, without veterans, there would be no United States of America.
So well put, Bill. Thank you, sir. It's the words that you just said. I understood every one of them. You didn't throw in some $5 word that nobody understands. And what I can't understand is why kids and some parents today don't appreciate what we have, what we've gone through, and what our veterans have preserved for us.
Yeah, it's kind of, I always say that there was two people back in the 50s. There was Adlai Stevenson, who ran on the Democratic Party as the president. They asked him, said, how come you lose such large words? He said, I speak not only to be understood, but not to be misunderstood. They asked Douglas MacArthur and asked him, says, why come you use so many small words? He said, I not only speak to be understood, but not to be misunderstood. So, we take it in complex ways either way. We try to keep it in simple form. I heard one time that I read something that Napoleon, whenever he wrote an order, he had a moron, and he would ask them to read it and tell him what he said. And he said Napoleon would sit there and rewrite it until he could tell him what he was trying to say, and then he would send the order out. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it makes a good story anyway.
Okay, let's. We only have a few minutes left, but we've got to talk about your book, The Longest Rescue. And did you have in mind, as you were in your pleasure ride in the Hanoi Hilton, did you say, okay, when I get out of this, I'm going to write a book? Or when did it come to you that I'm going to tell my story?
Well, it was long past the war. I guess I'd sit down after some of the other guys had written books, and I'd sit down and write a few things, and then I'd get writer's cramps after the first page, and and I really honestly thought nobody cares. They're too busy with their life to care. And I was visiting the Andersonville Museum down there, and one of the rangers down there, and she listened to me and give talks to different people coming through the park, and she said, you need to write a book. I said, about what? I said, I don't think I have a story, and she said, I think you do. And she hooked me up with Dr. Robbins, and he was a history professor, mostly dealt in Civil War between, they were courting at the time, you might say, and ended up married, but she kept saying, you need to write this book, and you need to interview, and so we sat down, and we sat there and for a long while, and so he finally agreed to write the book, and and he takes it from a history angle, which is important. In other words, I jokingly say my book is the Forrest Gump book of Vietnam. In other words, he wanted it to be factual, not only what I said, but what was going on at that particular time, and so he made it so it can be used as a reference material, and the story of essentially never giving up. There was, we always hear the stories about the people that give up. We don't hear a lot of about the stories of people that don't give up. And it's I've talked to people that some have said they've read my book at least 3 times, is that they find something different each time. I said, well, each time I speak, I say something a little different. I say, I'm trying to cram 7.5 years into 45 minutes. You got a lot of material to work with, and so it was it's just the kind of trying to inspire people that
Okay,
life is just not a way to give up. Life is that's I have a difficulty today dealing with the the PTSD. I want to help, but I don't know how, because I've just never thought about anything except life. So it's difficult to deal with that.
Bill, let me ask you, you're titled The Longest Rescue, and yet you weren't rescued. You were released when everybody else was released, correct?
Right.
So how did you come up with the title?
We consider it the long rescue because the guy we were trying to rescue, we walked out with 7.5 years later. we didn't give him that fancy ride and the cold beer and the pat on the back and send him back to work, but we did get to come home and have a cold beer with him and say, now let's go on with our life.
I bet you all were sharing the same shirt, weren't you?
Pardon me?
I bet you all were sharing the same shirt, weren't you?
Yeah.
You.
But yeah, we, like I said, that's some of the things, and then some of the things out there in my own life, when, like I said, it took me 51 years to get my marriage right, and so, so we have the ups and downs through our own life, and,
sure.
And like I said, I get up in the morning counting my blessings, not my misfortunes,
Yes, sir.
I'm like the young boy out there fishing. Somebody come by and said, son, how many fish you caught? He said, if I get this one and 5 more, I'll have 6. So you just keep trying.
Optimism. Bill, with that bit of information, we're going to have to wrap it up. And thank you once again for being on America's Web Radio and David's Pick. And thank Rick White and all of the folks that support and have been inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. Please go, if you're listening, please take an opportunity to go to it. Also, Johns Creek Healing Wall and Peachtree Corners Memorial to the Vietnam veterans. And again, once again, thank you for your service, Bill, and for what you endured so we could all be free. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.